very much. I thought I'd seen everything at poetry readings, but with the possibility of the police arriving imminently, this will be a first. I want to begin with a poem called Landscape. How old the dark has become, standing silent in these fields while horses weave through each other's shadows. They have come like warm rain and run over the hills in the moonlight and stood so long alone, no one impatient would ever notice them there. When the wind and the winter return, the horses will still be here, their silhouettes outlined in the pale moonlight, standing still and silent on these hills, or stamping, splattering snow in small spills, the whole scene turning slowly into landscape, like our own earliest memories. So I want to start with a couple of poems about early memories. This is called In the Cold Air Register. Sometimes, when something would fall into the cold air register, my father would take me by the legs and lower me into it. His fingers, locked like leg irons on my ankles, held me as I fumbled for what had fallen. When I'd call, he would pull me, wet with sweat, my head spinning back up into the clear air, into the room spattered with such bright light. Driving alone in winter. Driving alone in winter through acres of land deserted by everything save the snow trapped in the ruts of the road, the moon broken by the bare trees. I remember the days when my brothers and I would fall asleep in the back seat on the way home. Tonight, coming home, I remember the faint light on the dashboard holding my father's face, my mother's soft voice, my brothers asleep, the moon running among the trees beside the car. The hunt. As if we both had been waiting for this to happen, I see him rise up from the hill in early twilight, his shotgun across his shoulder, walking toward me in the even stride I would recognize anywhere. We meet at the half hill. The pocket in the back of his coat is filled with a day's quota of small game. We meet to return together as if we had set out as one and taken different directions. He does not seem surprised or ask why I am here. I turn and fall in with his stride. The car, stranded in my childhood, waits at the end of a meadow near a small stream. He hands me half of his take and we bend to clean the game, then get in the car. He turns toward home. We sit and smoke without speaking. Now I remember that road. Somewhere out there in the dark is the place I started from years ago. This next poem is called Triptych for My Father. It's in 3 parts. I'll just pause between them. It's in triplets, and it's perfect rhymed. Bent low over the old piano, his eyes closed, my father leans into the only tune he knows. Snow catches in the corners of the windows. The patterned panes are more than half erased by the intricate embroidery of ice which traces the glass. The firelight falls full upon his face. On a clear, cold morning in late autumn, he led the hogs out and brought the hammer down hard in one quick stroke. The ground puddled with blood, but they fell without feeling anything. The cut breath, rising slowly from each purpled snout, caught in the crisp air like an afterthought. This is more than memory. Tonight, unable to sleep, I sit watching snow fall slowly through the deep trees outside the window. The fire falls in a heap. I cannot kill him off. His face is traced in the window, watching me. The long wind whistles in the old piano. The room is alive with lost music in diminuendo. A vision in late afternoon. The heat, like a hand, presses against my head. And I think I see from across the yard my mother, dead, move past the window of the living room. Obviously in a hurry about something inside, she'd only glanced quickly out the window as she passed through the room and then was gone. All this happened suddenly, as visions always do. But now I wonder if my mother might have seen me, fleetingly, standing there in the yard as she hurried through the room. Was she, like me, unsure of what she thought she saw? Was it too late for her to turn, to look back over her shoulder? I wonder if my image materialized for her only after she had already gone on into the other room, in much the same way that my vision of her flared and burned, then blurred in the late afternoon heat with the weight of all the years. This is called The River of Vision, and for my son. What I saw was a river, a certain slant of light cut through large leafless trees, bent almost double. That and not much more. The dark river moved. The wind dropped off, and the trees bent back upright. The sky blackened and stars appeared. We walked hand in hand without speaking towards something in the distance. I don't know what it was or whether we reached it. That didn't make much difference. What did seem important was the river, old symbol for the stream of time running swift and dark beneath the star-struck sky. But this was just a vision. Why I would want to tell you anything so indistinct is not clear, even to me. We both know that I have been wrong about many things. And I want to close out this little sequence with one way to reconstruct the scene. The moon, through light snow between the trees, distorted by the broken glass, looked blue, almost the color of the girl's blue dress or the man's eyes. The car came to rest against the large maple 40 yards from the road, bisecting the angle of the slow curve beyond the bridge. The girl was thrown free. She lay as if asleep against the tree, her hands in her lap. Perhaps she was dreaming. The man was still behind the wheel, his hand to his head, a cup of blood spilled over his yellow shirt. The brake pedal was pushed all the way through the floorboard. It was winter. A light snow fell past her window. She had been waiting for hours. When he came, she had fallen asleep. She dreamed she was dreaming. He whispered and she awakened. She smiled. They sat watching snow fall through the trees. The moon moved slowly across the sky. They spoke. He knew the road by heart. His father had helped to build the bridge. They were speaking softly together. The faint blue light reflected from the snow as it fell slowly through the trees made the blue of her dress bluer. They did not speak of the night. No doubt they hardly noticed. There was nothing to know. It happened without warning. There, suddenly outlined in the dark like an animal only visible when it turns to let you see its eyes, a shape of something insubstantial cut off his view as he started to turn beyond the bridge, just into the long, slow curve. He tried to blink it back. The girl in the blue dress leaned against the tree. She seemed to be sleeping. The man remained in the car, upright, his blue eyes open. Light snow fell slowly through the barren limbs of the tree above the car. The moon moved across the sky. It cast a light blue reflection on the scene, the snow, the broken glass. The next several poems have to do with various places. The first is set in Austria at a place called Heiligenkreuz, which is a monastery from the 11th century. It's about 50 kilometers southwest of Vienna. And my wife and son and I visited there once, spent a day there going around through the services with the monks there. And it struck me that that the monk who was showing us around could easily be me. We were, I thought, about the same age, et cetera, just, the accidents of life, I suppose. And so this is the poem that came about as a result of that. It's called Virgil at Heiligenkreuz. The cold comes close around us, breathes with me. Do I drowse? In the corner near the cracked column, a young monk slips past so quickly I almost miss him. He is late, hurrying to service with his brothers. He does not think to look over his shoulder, never would have noticed me sitting half asleep in the long dark down the cold aisle of the centuries where we both serve. This next poem is set in Norway, not far from Oslo. And again, it was a family trip. And the day that we were there, we came to this stave church built 1,000 years ago, closed, except that the day that we happened to be there, there was a group that had made a special arrangement to be there, and they had a guide, and they had opened the church just for them. And so we were able to join this small group and go inside. A very small place, not much bigger than the circle of these chairs, and it was circular. And we just went in and sat there for a while and then left. And so this is the poem that was the result of that. It's called Simply Stave Church. Even then, it must have seemed out of place. Today, we make our slow, wet way up a steep trail through evergreens as old as this century, to a door so low we have almost to bow to enter. Inside, the air is thick with age. The dark light does little to illuminate the small, round room, the central wooden altar, the benches built into the walls. It is almost impossible to imagine what it must have been like. The small crowd congregated here no more than once or twice a year, sitting without speech in this place made holy by tradition more than anything else. We sit and stare and hug ourselves for warmth. It has the hush of churches anywhere, and I wonder that we make so many pilgrimages to places like this, often almost inaccessible, to sit and stare off into the musty ancient air of other centuries. What do we hope to find? Our faint faith, our little service ended, we rise and bend beneath the door again and track our way back the way we came, through a snowy trail of our own faintly frozen footprints. This poem is called Tapestry. I've seen a lot of tapestries, and I rather like them. So I've thought a bit about them. And this is no particular one. It's generic. Veins and arteries carry the blood from corner to corner. The interpretation is easy once you find the right place to begin. The Duke, on his white stallion, has killed a knight from the invading army near the center of the scene. 3 of his own followers lie in a heap at his feet. There are too many corpses to count. A small stream winds through the valleys, the rolling hills of the background done in a flourish of autumnal color. In the lower left-hand corner, worked intricately into the dense undergrowth, is the small signature of one of the women who worked her life away on the other side of this scene, in the cold tower where the tapestry for centuries has hung. This poem, I'm a sports nut, and one of the sports that I have liked, especially in terms of the Olympic events, is the super heavyweight weightlifting event. I've never lifted anything of any sort, but I was intrigued by these gigantic men whose whole life is committed to, 2 or 3 times a year putting on their underwear and walking out on the stage and lifting up something and dropping it down. And that's all they do. That's all they ever have to do. This particular poem has to do with an Olympic event of some years ago. It was being reported by Jim McKay for, I think it was ABC. And in this competition, the favorite by far was a Russian lifter by the name of Alexeyev. And if you know anything about this event, you know that he set in his lifetime, in his career time, more than 1,000 records. Each time lifting like 1 ounce more than he had lifted before, right? And so he was the heavyweight favorite. But there was a guy in the competition who was in some ways even more intriguing to me, a German lifter by the name of Gerd Bonk. It seems like a perfect name for a weightlifter. Anyhow, so they were, and this was live television because it was the Olympics, but there was some kind of a glitch. And so they had about a 20-minute time frame to fill up. And Jim McKay talked for 20 minutes. But what they did is they took their cameras into the back room where these guys were warming up, and they just showed them doing their warm-ups while McKay constantly went on with this monologue. Well, the interesting was to see these guys back there, these huge men, and they do everything in slow motion, it seemed to me. You know, they just walk. And each of them was ministered unto by a whole retinue of ordinary-sized people who you know, flapped their arms and put talcum on their head and stuff like that. And these lifters paid absolutely no attention to these underlings. And you had the feeling that they could just go like this and wipe out 6 or 8 of them and not notice, right? Well, anyhow, in the course of reporting, Jim McKay pointed out that in a practice session a week before, Bonk, the German lifter, broke a blood vessel in his eye. And it was that detail that I think most intrigued me. Bonk lost, he became second. Alexeyev won yet again. And so this was so then I thought, what would it be like to be a super heavyweight weightlifter? What do they think about? What do they do? What is their life like? The weightlifter. Only the weight awaits him. There is nothing to know. He has only one thing to do. Now already he stands over it, breathing deeply, then bending, waiting, until in one instant of motion, a blur too quick to be seen, he lifts it above his head, holds it. One summer he ran with his father through flower-filled fields, the wind among them, turning them. His heart in his head, his breath like lead, his legs lost to only the running, the wind, the fields filled with flowers, his father. Blood squirts from one of his eyes, but he does not blink. Instead, he stands motionless, not thinking of anything, not even the weight. He feels something small spin around in his head. He steps from under the weight and throws it like a thing to the floor. If they ever existed, the fields and flowers faded long ago. For the old man, alone with his memories, time is like the broken clock beside the faded photograph on the mantel. In the mist of a misty morning, he walks quietly along a lonely road in a white winter. This is a poem. I used to live in Waco, and this is a poem that was written not long after I moved to Waco. It's called I-35 south of Waco. I'd only been in Texas for, I don't know, a year, maybe less. Anyhow, somebody wrote to me and they said they were doing an anthology of Texas poems or Southwest poems or something like that. And they wanted to know if I had anything for it. And I had only this one poem, which I had just finished. And so I sent it to them. And I waited for a long time, and months went by, And then finally I got a letter from the editor, and he said that sorry. He wanted to apologize, but he said he and his fellow editors had puzzled and puzzled over this poem, and with regret they were not going to use it because they weren't able to understand it, which I thought was interesting because it was true. I-35 south of Waco. The Ford pickup, painted red but rusted, straddled the center line. Both back fenders were dented in. It was almost noon in Waco. The truck stalled in the sun, in time, in Texas. As if in a dream, it began to move forward slowly. There were 3 of them in the cab, 2 men and a dog. One was brushing his teeth. One was drinking from a brown bottle. The dog was driving. The poem was several months later published in North Carolina, where they were able to understand it. And of course, it's gone on to spawn at least 3 television commercials that I'm aware of. So I'm glad you understand it as well. I've written a whole bunch of poems called the Bones Poems. And I want to give you just a little sample of the Bones Poems now. Altogether, there are about at least 80 of these, and all kinds of things happen to the bones. This is called The Bones Meet the Bones. Under cover of dark, the bones move between the trees, step silently over twigs, stones, walk on water in the long moonlight. No one would know they were there. And then from the other direction, coming toward them as inevitably as death, the bones come striding. Alert in the moonlight, as clean as rain, the bones meet the bones in a small meadow. They walk up to one another like old friends and fall on each other's shoulders and weep so loudly, even the wind stops to listen. Where the bones move. When you move, your bones move below you, under the earth, stalking the footprints of your shadow. As if you were walking on water, your form reflecting beneath the water, head down in the dark currents where the bones move. When you bend close to the earth, putting your ear near your ear, your heads together, your feet treading water and air, you hear the dark words seep from your skull, grow upward beneath you, lodge in your mind. As you walk, you listen. You speak to hear, then listen again. You run following the bones. They run following you. You are old friends and enemies. It has been too long since you've seen one another, since you sat down together and talked in the dark hours. The recognition. When they bend close to the earth, their shadows fill with flesh. They make love. They are stripping off skin, letting it fall to the floor. Naked, they switch the lights off and clash in the dark like armies. All night long, the sparks fly up from them, burn away in the wind. It is exciting. It is as exciting as death. after 3 days. After 3 days without water or shelter, alone on the empty sand, with only the stale wind for companion, when anyone else would have given up, the bones grit their teeth, spit at death, and drink away the dark. This is called Some Things the Bones Never Know. When I got to this poem, I was sort of glad that there were some things that the bones didn't know, because they had really just taken over my life. Everything I wrote became a bones poem. This went on for about 3 years. Some things the bones never know. When you sleep, they think you have died. When you waken, they believe in miracles. When you hide, they look for you. When you die, they are born to the air. They say, "Where did he go?" They are death. They never die. The promise. And if one day they will rise, do not let the light know, or the ground which covers them, which was always warm. Or even this song they sang, this sad, long song, no, do not let it know. Let it come, if it comes, like unexpected water when roots are dry, like lightning in the calm summer sky, or animals newborn stepping out on new fallen snow, or breath where no lungs are. And then this is the last in the sequence, at rest. Now the bones are at rest. No one need know where they have gone or what they dream to do. The bones are at rest, content. Perhaps they are dead. Perhaps they are only asleep. Perhaps they will never return. For now, anyhow, it is over. This endless emptying, this filling, so much like what we name breath. I think I'll read 3 more poems. This is called What We Said. There wasn't any way to know most of it for sure, and it wouldn't have made much difference anyhow. So what we said, the way we told it, was as good as any, since truth can't ever really be found out or untangled, the rope finally thrown away with the knot still in it. So what we said was that she must have known him, must have let him in, because there wasn't any sign of forced entry, no broken windows, and the only door locked from the inside. He wasn't some sort of magician or shape changer who could slip in through the chimney or come in under the door like smoke or empty air, appear or disappear at will. He probably sat there talking to her for a while, and she might have even given him something to drink, because there were 2 glasses in the sink, and 2 cups too. But without fingerprints, it will be difficult to know anything for certain. Maybe the autopsy will tell us what she had had to eat or drink, and maybe not, if it was only liquid. Anyhow, they must have walked to the bedroom together, even if she'd had too much to drink, and she'd folded some of her clothes as if she were waiting for him. Or maybe that was when he came in, interrupting her while she was undressing, after waiting, watching her from the window over the fire escape. The one window unlocked and still open a crack when we arrived. So what we thought was that there might be fingerprints on the windowsill or somewhere else in the room, or on one of the glasses in the sink, or somewhere where we least expected them, but we didn't find any prints anywhere other than hers, which of course were everywhere. Her eyes were open, a beautiful blue, and she looked only slightly startled to be staring so, as if she'd been surprised by death too, or hadn't expected it, or only seen it coming when he came too close, and she probably thinking of something else, something totally different, and only then, at the last instant, saw it for what it was, and saw it was too late. And maybe she started to smile at that, realizing, and then stopped, just as she died. So what we said was that it looked like love gone wrong, a real accident, something totally unintended. Still, she had only been in the city several weeks, and as far as we knew, she hadn't found a job or had much time to make new acquaintances or find friends. And we know she hadn't known anyone here before in another life, so to speak. Someone who might have been watching or waiting for her, someone who had followed her home, a secret admirer, or even a former friend she'd be happy to see when he arrived, even unexpectedly. Someone she would have welcomed in to talk about the past that they had had together, or the place they both were from, or to catch up on old news. We knew that, like most likely, many of the things we imagined were things we were never be able to prove, that most cases of this kind are never solved. But we always try to do our best, and therefore, if anyone asks, you can tell them that this is what we said. This is called Near the Cabin.
This is like a cabin, isn't it?
Near the cabin. I had seen the trail of fresh blood across the edge of the field in front of the house, but was surprised when the hunters came to the door to ask if they could cross the land and find the deer they knew they had hit but not killed. I thought briefly what to say to them and sent them away. And then I knew that now it was up to me. I followed the bursts of the blood that seemed to have fallen with each breath. At first there was a steady trail of the blood, just as there were traceable tracks. And then there was less and less of both. Each blood spurt smaller and further away, each print fainter and less distinct. Near the end, there was only a bloody smear here and there on a bush or spotting a stone. And then there was nothing at all. I went on in what seemed the logical direction and had almost given up when suddenly there she was, crumpled over her own useless legs, staring directly at me, her chest heaving hard, bubbles of blood ballooning from her nostrils and oozing from her opened mouth. Her eyes were going wild in every direction at once. Still, she didn't seem to be afraid. We stared at one another. Then she tried to lift herself and fell. I didn't know what I could do and thought I should have left the hunters to follow, to find her and finish her off, to take away what they wanted. Now it was just the two of us together. I sat down on a log not far away to keep her calm and watched her as she watched could wait, and that I didn't want to harm her further, that neither of us really knew what to do. And this is called A Visit. High on the hill, near the barren stands of oaks and maples, the small pupil of the pond glints and closes in the late afternoon light. I have come to stand and stare off into this distance, across these stubble fields fallen fallow for the winter. The wind hints that the promise of snow will become before full dark. I raise my collar and tuck in the ends of scarf around my throat, choking off my own blown breath. I have come back after years away for something I've wanted and waited to say, but have almost forgotten. Now, standing still on this small hill, the icy wind stinging my face, I see a hawk dive, then quickly rise with the day's prey twisting in its talons, a red ribbon of blood trailing beneath them as they glide up over the trees and out of sight. There is nothing more to see or hear. Even the wind is down to its least whisper. Before me, deep in their frozen plots, my parents lie together and alone. I say no prayer, but as I linger here, I see how everything is becoming a beautiful white blindness. Thank you very much.